subscribe.
Hi everybody and welcome. My name's Alison, the online piano and the online violin tutor. Today is a video on the top 10 most common piano mistakes. So these are mistakes that I most commonly see or most commonly have come across in my many years of piano teaching. They're in no particular order, but they are just probably the top 10. Well, it does what it says on the tin. They are the most common top 10 mistakes that I see students make when they're starting out on their piano career. I've been a culprit of making these mistakes as well. We all do it. It's all part of kind of growing up and learning the skill on the piano. So hopefully if there's any of you guys out there that are self-teaching or have had a few lessons on the piano, or complete beginners on the piano, or you've had lessons when you were younger, you've had many years of absence, you're worried that you've picked up really poor technique or bad habits, you don't have a teacher to advise you, or any situation like that, then this should help you in kind of not to make those mistakes, or the most common mistakes that I see. So there are a few more mistakes than the top 10 that I've put here for you, but then they start going into kind of personal, so they depend on your personal circumstances and things. So let's get started. Number one, hand position. What I mean by hand position really is just that sometimes when I see new students, or I don't know, older students, or students that have had lessons in the past or whatever, some students can have their hands flat against the piano, so where the palm of your hand is actually touching the kind of the wood or the bass bit underneath the keys. What you need to make sure is that your knuckles are, your fingers are bent round, and your knuckles and your wrist and sort of almost your elbow are all at the same height, rather than having your hands down that way. So if you're playing on the keys, your hands are down, you need to be up from the keys, so that you've got a nice, if you can see that from here, but you've got a nice kind of flexible position here where your fingers are nicely rounded, rather than having your hands down, because that's going to affect your technique later on. Banging and hammering the notes out. Now I've come across students who play on particularly old pianos, and in order to get a nice sound, or in order to get any sound out of them, they have to hit really hard on the keys. And of course, when you've got something like this is a Yamaha Clavinova digital piano. I absolutely love this digital piano. I'd say it's a nice digital piano, it's very comparable to a nice Yamaha grand piano. So students that play on like an older acoustic piano, for example, have to hit really hard, and of course when they come here, then they're really banging out the keys, when really there's no need to, because this is a digital piano. The keys are very nicely weighted. It was top of the range back in the day when I bought it, so you don't have to smash out the keys, but a lot of students tend to smack really hard on the keys, and you can always tell that when you get that kind of plastic sound that you're making. So instead of just hearing the notes, the fingers going over the notes, you're hearing a lot of smack as well when the hands are going down on the notes. So please don't hammer or bang the keys. There's a difference between trying to play forte or fortissimo, loud or really loud, and then hammering the keys. You don't have to, if you want to play fortissimo, honestly, there are other ways of playing it than having to smack down really hard. I'm not going to go into details of all that now, but you don't have to smack the keys down really hard to get a fortissimo sound, because you'll get an over. It's difficult to explain, but it won't sound fortissimo. It'll sound forced, and it'll sound hammered and everything. Okay, number 3, hands not in time when together. So whether you're doing 1-octave scales, and perhaps we're getting a bit of, I know that was a bit of an exaggeration there, but I was over exaggerating just so you can hear the point I was trying to make there. So sometimes, especially if you've got a lot of passage work that's going on, and it's very kind of semi-quavery and things in both the hands, not having the hands completely in time is another common problem. it is very difficult because the piano is a hands-on instrument where both hands are doing exactly the same thing, and by that I mean, for example, if you've got the violin, one hand is holding the violin using the fingers and the other hand is operating the bow, whereas on the piano both hands are operating the notes on the piano. So you'll always have one dominant hand and one weak hand. So my left hand is my weak hand, unfortunately. So especially when I hate Bach preludes, for example. They're so difficult to do because there's so much going on in the left hand, and of course that for me is a lot weaker than it is in the right hand. So the right hand's going, yeah, no problem. The left hand's going, nah, not liking this. So I have to work really hard on the left hand and go back to doing left hand scales and really kind of going through the passage work that I've got in the left hand. So hands not being together. Number 4, not practicing enough. So if you don't practice, then you won't get better. So not practicing enough. I know it seems the most obvious thing, but yeah, not practicing enough. Number 5, practicing too fast. So many students practice things so fast. In fact, a lot of it is very common, which is why it's in the top 10 common mistakes. But quite often when students start new pieces, and maybe I demonstrate the piece to them so they can hear how it's going to do, the first thing they want to do is go in at it at full speed and try to play it at the speed that they're going to be playing it for the exam or for a concert or for whatever purpose. So they're in a sense sight reading the piece of music or starting off on the piece of music, and they're trying to play it at full speed, the speed that it would be taken at, which isn't going to work. So you need to practice it much slower and much more consistent. So there might be passages that you're better at than others, and you'll have to suck it up and take them a lot slower, but on a whole everything will be at a nice, consistent, steady speed. Then you'll be able to lift the whole piece up a notch and get it much faster, rather than having some really fast bits that you know and then some really slow bits that you don't, then really fast, then really slow. Slow it all down so you're going the fastest, I get this confused, you're going as fast as you can for the slowest passage. So the passage that you're worst at, however fast you can take that speed, is the speed that you set everything to. So like I said, there'll be bits that you can and can't do, and those will be really boring, but everything will be chugging along at nice, one sensible pace, and you'll be able to hear the tune coming through, and it will be much better because you'll be able to lift the whole thing up a notch and take it a lot faster. Okay, number 6, not thinking you're good enough or giving up. A lot of, anybody really, adults, kids, anybody who's learning sometimes gets in this situation where they think, oh, I'm not good enough, oh, I can't do it, oh, I'm not gonna do it. Nothing's too hard to do. It just goes back to number 4, not actually practicing enough. So I believe anybody can do anything if they put their mind to it. I get a lot of comments from my current YouTube subscribers all the time saying, I'm completely self-taught, I got a violin for Christmas, or my friend gave me a violin, or I discovered this violin, or whatever it is, piano, keyboard, whatever. I've been looking at your videos and now I can actually play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or whatever it is that they can play, and it's great. And a couple of months before that, a couple of weeks before that, they never even saw themselves playing the violin, and now they can. So it's just all about determination. Where there's a will, there's a way. So if something's too hard to do, then it's going to have a really good outcome. Music isn't an overnight thing. I'm so glad and grateful that I did it when I was 4 years old, because now I have a skill that not only a lot of the population can't do in comparison. There are a lot of people that don't play a musical instrument. Obviously there are lots that do, but there are more that don't than do. And I get a lot of people that sort of think, oh, I can't wait to get to your level, and that's nice that I've got through that level and I am where I am. So yeah, it's worth it in the end. There have been some hard moments, but you've got to do it if you want the good stuff at the end of it. Okay, number 7, and this is probably my number 1 stroke joint number 1 bugbear when I'm teaching the piano or the violin or anything, and that is ignoring blatant mistakes and just carrying on. brushing them under the carpet. It drives me nuts to hear it. It's so many, I think it's just the ear being lazy, or just not lazy, but musically lazy, I guess. When I hear students playing a piece of music, they know they've played it wrong because the ear's telling them something doesn't sound right, yet they ignore it and carry on anyway. Don't carry on, sort out the mistake, especially if it's a mistake that you're making again and again and again. You must sort the mistake out, otherwise you begin to, the ear begins to think that that mistake isn't a mistake, and that's actually part of the music. And then you're retraining your ear to think that mistakes aren't mistakes, they're real. So if the ear says it's wrong, it probably is wrong. The exception to that rule might be if you've got something very 21st century, and it is a lot more atonal, a lot more abstract, then that would probably be the only exception to that. But the majority of pieces that you guys are going to be playing, they will sound nice, and they should sound nice. So if the ear says it's wrong, just have a quick look at the music, because it probably is wrong. Don't brush it under the carpet, sort those mistakes out, because the further you get into learning that piece of music, the harder those mistakes are to eradicate them later on down the line. Okay, number 8, too much sustain on the pedal. That's probably my joint number 1, possibly even more number 1 than number 7, ignoring the blatant mistakes. I hate it when I see students using too much pedal. They don't change the pedal. A lot of people don't know how to use the pedal. I have done a video on how to use a sustain and how to do that properly. But you know, without going into too much detail, a lot of students don't change the pedal at the right time. A lot of people, when I see performing anywhere, don't always change the pedal at the right time. They're changing it before they get to the note they need to change it on, so you get that ever so slight silence where there's no sustain just for a split second, which you can ever so slightly hear, or they're just letting it bleed through into the next bar, or over to the next harmony or the next chord, or whatever it is. So then they're not lifting the pedal up, and then they're not using their ear. My teacher always used to tell me pedal for the ear, obviously pedal for the music as well, but if the ear thinks there's too much sustain, go ahead and change the pedal. So too much sustain is another bugbear of mine. Okay, number 9, not noticing the key signature. It seems so blatantly obvious, but so many people don't actually notice the key signature. If there are like 3 flats in the key signature, or 3 sharps or 2 sharps, so many people don't actually notice those sharps in there. And I guess that goes a little bit hand in hand with number 7, ignoring the mistakes. But not playing any sharps and flats in there. If you're in the key of D major or E flat major, or whatever key major that you're in, whatever, you'll know if something doesn't sound right, because it's just going to have that funny twang to it where perhaps you should have played an F sharp, but you played an F natural instead, and it's not going to sound right. So again, ear thinks it doesn't sound right, it probably isn't sound right. So please just make sure that you sort of familiarize yourself with the key signature so that you can put them in. If you do forget to put your flats or sharps in, and you're going along and you keep, oh, I made that mistake again, then why don't you just write a little flat or a sharp on the offending note in the music, so that it just reminds yourself. That's fine to do that. I sometimes do that in my music, because maybe I've had a few D sharps and then D naturals and then D sharps again, and I'm all over the show. And sometimes I forget to put in a D sharp, then I'll just write a little sharp next to the D, just so that I can, not going to make that mistake again, until I get to a point where I'm not really looking at that sharp I've written in anymore, because I've learned, or I've trained myself that I need to play a D sharp. Okay, and finally, number 10, using bad fingering. This is probably my second bugbear, along with ignoring blatant mistakes and too much sustain being number 1. So this is my second one, and a lot of students tend to be a bit naughty with the fingering, and they like to use the same fingers in a row for the same note. You can't do that. There are exceptions to the rule, but 9 times out of 10, you must change your hand position, so you're not using... So you're not trying to do like 3 or 4 notes in the row with like your little finger or your 4th finger because you've run out of fingers, or you've got a 5th finger down and you're skipping over with a 4th finger. It's ever so awkward. I can't even do it. It's ever so awkward to be doing that. So really bad fingering is not good, because later on you'll think to yourself, why doesn't it sound really smooth? Why can't I get it going flowing? Why can't I get it going faster? And that's all down to do with the fingering that you're doing. If you go back and do your scales and things, they're going to help you out with all that dodgy fingering and things. So make sure you sort out the fingering, and it'll be written in the music, or it should be written in the music anyway. So that's it really. That's my top 10 most common piano mistakes. So hopefully you guys can sort of take heed of some of those warnings or kind of little notes that I've made for you all, and bear them in mind as you're going along, and sort of don't make the same mistakes. If you make the sort of mistakes now, they're very hard, or the top 10 as a general, they're very hard to kind of get out of later on down the line. So if you bear those sorts of things in mind, then then it should be kind of happy days for you all. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it's been helpful to at least one of you out there anyway. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
Subscribe.